All right, guys, welcome to my podcast, Balanced-ish. I have my friend here, Zachary West. I, sir, am going to introduce you. I got my little cheaty notepad here that I wrote some quick things down. You are, we're going to get to the important stuff first before, we talk about the gack that's afterwards. But important. Husband, wife, 3 children.
I'm a husband and a wife.
You have a wife.
Correct.
Yes.
True.
Yeah. It's 2023. But no, we're not talking about that. We're not going to talk about that. No. Have a wife. You have 3 kids, all boys. And I've done a few photo shoots with you and your family. To have 3 boys that are all different, but yet they're relatively good kids.
Sure,
they're relatively good kids. Whenever you're very prim and proper in a lot of ways because you keep them prim and proper, but also I feel like you don't have them. They're not. They don't seem like they have ill will towards other humans.
Not towards other humans.
Besides their own siblings.
Maybe each other.
Yeah, that's normal. But so impressive. Then you went to hold on. More importantly, big Lord of the Rings fan.
Yes.
All right. Also poetry.
Definitely.
Right. You rhyme all the time.
Yes. Good. That was a good one. That was one right there.
Hey. So stupid. Probably one of the best 40/ any birthday party I've ever gone to, the Lord of the Rings theme party, where you quoted Bilbo Baggins' whole speech when they were in the Shire, when he throws the ring on and disappears, that whole scene. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, that's on you.
And I've always wanted to say that phrase at a birthday party. I know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve, or something like that. That was the...
When I first heard that, I was like, that's amazing. And true. And I love how true, all that is. Where it's a lot of people relate to that. They just don't want to say it. But he had the ring to disappear. That's right. The idea, right? He was banking on that. So then the other stuff, you're a lawyer, and you went to law school and those kind of successes and whatnot. So, and then now you have your own law firm.
Yes.
Right.
As of January this year, went out on my own, and I'm West Law Firm now.
Is there something I missed in your introduction where you would say, Brett, you should have talked about this?
No, I think the Lord of the Rings pretty much covers it.
Yeah. Right. Very, very educated. Whenever I'm around you, I do feel like my vocabulary does 2 things. One, it gets slightly better. I feel like I think a little more okay, what's a better word to use here while I'm talking to you? But also, you're a walking report card when you realize how bad my vocabulary is. That also happens both things are happening at the exact same time whenever I'm talking with you. So why law school?
So I did an English undergrad, which, that might probably tracks from everything else that you've said. And I got out of undergrad, didn't really know what I was going to do, didn't really want to teach high school. I'd been there before and wasn't really interested in going back.
What about a youth pastor?
That's a good one, but I didn't consider it.
That's what they always write. It's history. They go to school for history or go to school for English. Then they become a youth pastor.
Yeah, no one suggested youth pastor. Maybe a guy.
Yeah, it's kind of cool that you didn't. It's fine. There's enough out there. They're okay.
I feel like maybe my name isn't right. I feel like if I was going to be a youth pastor, I should have been named Josh or something like that.
Zach?
Yeah, I don't know.
Just like Zachariah, right?
Are there Zach youth pastors?
Yeah. I don't want to look them up, but I'm banking on yes.
All right.
Yeah. I didn't know there was another Brett Golden. I look up my name. I was a murderer, I guess, in the 80s or something like that. I was I was born in the 80s. It wasn't me. It was just another guy.
Right.
So
another reason not to Google yourself.
Don't Google yourself. No. So what took you to law school was you just
I wasn't gonna teach high school.
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna go on and get a graduate degree in English. and I was working at a bakery at the time, and in Gainesville, and so I just met my wife, who she wasn't my wife yet, but we had just started dating, and I was being introduced to her father. She was introducing me to her father, and he's like, "Well, what do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm working at this bakery. I'm thinking about going to law school." And he said, "All right, well, either buy the bakery or go to law school." And I was like, "All right, I can't buy the bakery, and they'll give me loans to go to law school." So, boom.
So he gave you the ultimatum because if you're gonna be with my daughter,
no, it wasn't an ultimatum, but
you
it was
need
like
to be successful.
It wasn't an ultimatum, but
you
it
can't
was.
keep baking pies. You need to either be the one that runs the pie ingredients and goes and gets it and does all the thing, or go become somebody else that makes a bunch of money and doing other things like law school.
In hindsight, it was really good advice. At
Right.
the time, and it definitely wasn't an ultimatum. It was very much like it was probably tossed off. He probably didn't think very hard about what he was saying. He was
Right.
just like, "Well, you should do this or this,"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, I can't do that. I got to do this."
Do you consider yourself a people pleaser?
Oh, certainly.
Okay. Did you feel that kind of vibe whenever it was like I'm dating his daughter. I know he might even be not making a big deal out of this, but I feel as though I need to do one of these things because if not, he's going to be disappointed in me.
It was like one of those. It was like one of those things where someone speaks something, almost like prophecy, right? Like someone speaks something into your life that doesn't mean much to them necessarily, right? Or they don't think a whole lot about it, but it triggers something in you that is really valuable, or you see as valuable later on. It doesn't even really feel valuable at that time.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, there's a story that my wife's grandfather tells. He grew up in, for part of it in Fort Myers Beach, right near Naples, and he was going to high school and he's about to graduate, and one of his teachers just randomly was like, "Well, where are you going to go to college?" And he's like, "Go to college. I'm going to be a bricklayer. I'm going to lay brick in the sun, and it's going to be great." But that got him thinking. And she was like, "No, you're going to go to college. Here's how you apply." Then she walked him through the whole process, and it was just someone assuming something about him radically changed the course of his whole life.
Right.
And
okay, I had somebody that started this spark in my brain. Because he did stand-up comedy in Gainesville. Supposedly, he was a manager at a restaurant here in town for a little bit. And I was talking to him. I don't know. We talked for a few minutes, and he was like, "You ever try stand-up comedy?" And I was like, "I never thought of it, but that sparked the idea." I again still haven't done it. This kind of the whole point of this whole podcast is the idea of how much I procrastinate and how the little drive that I have, and I want to talk to people that are driven. But I have been that sparked something where it's like, I don't even know if that guy even remembers that conversation or even that one, that one thing. But then from there, I then started to think I don't want to be pompous and be like, "Oh, I'm funny," but I noticed okay, people relatively enjoy my company somewhat, and so I'm trying to think all right, I guess I should try this, and get this going. So I have a book where I've been just writing ideas for jokes and things like that, mm-hmm. and I have one friend who completely discouraged me. I kind of give I'm like, I don't have anything down mm-hmm. to do it. But it's this is an idea. And he's like, "Yeah, keep writing." And I'm like, "Oh, no, I'm done. I'm never doing this ever again. I'm throwing it all away." But no, Brett, don't do that.
Well, give us one. You have one?
No.
Okay.
No, absolutely not. This was only a few weeks ago. My friend did this. I'm beaten down too far to where I'm I think we were talking about before this, where the idea of rehearsing and improv, all my funny stuff that relatively happens it's improv. It's or it's just conversation that happens, and I just start spitting stuff out, and then I try and write that down. Then I try and kind of regurgitate it, and I'm like, "This isn't the same. This isn't the same." But I can't let that discourage me. I can't, because there is probably something there, and I think I have a bucket list of just doing it once, standing up for 5 minutes, a 5-minute thing or a 3-minute thing, whatever an open mic does mm-hmm. somewhere. and just being like, all right, I'm never going to do this again.
Yeah, you should do it. Well,
Because I've also seen people bomb before.
Well, sure.
And
I mean, that has to be an option, right? I mean, that's
It's not only is it an option, it's part of the job.
right.
You should bomb at one point. You should know what it feels like. At least that's what they say. That's what comedians say. Like everybody has bombed.
That was like I was in a poetry writing class in undergrad. So this would have been like 2002 or 3 or something like that. And it was with this TA. His name was Andrew Cosma, great poet. And he had us all write a poem in class, like in the middle of class. We're all sitting around in a circle. And he said, write a two stanzas, 4 lines each, rhymed poem, and go. You have 20 minutes or whatever. And like everyone had something that matched the criteria, right? 2 stanzas, 4 lines each. They all, they rhymed ABAB or ABBA or whatever the rhyme scheme was. And I could not, for the life of me, something about being put under that pressure. I was like, no, I cannot. My brain like broke. I had something, but it was horrible. Like I can't even. I'm sure I blocked it out of my memory.
Yeah. Did you just like draw a blank in your brain? Like it just like. How many minutes did you say you had?
I don't know, 20 minutes.
Right.
Maybe it was even longer. I don't know.
Right.
But it was...
You just blacked out.
I couldn't. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
Like, and so after... And that was the bombing, right?
Right.
Like I was like, oh, I'm done. I can't do this poetry thing. Like, this is not for me. This is my first poetry class. Like, first class... It's probably the first class of the year, right?
Yeah.
And I'm glad I stuck with it, and it ended up being okay. But that was just like it's almost like you've got a bomb so that you know like where the bottom is.
There's so many stories with that, right? Like you have even like Michael Jordan not making his high school team, right? That gave him the drive. Not to say that this relates to Michael Jordan's story, right? As epic as that is, but I was in drama in my 12th grade year. I wish I was in drama the whole time. I loved it. I like gravitated towards it. I was like, oh, after this, I want to just the drive of being like the excitement of being up on stage. And heck, the first night, like we performed, I blanked and I actually like had to improv like a line or two to come. I love that. The second night went flawlessly. I actually love the fact that I messed up the first night and still kind of came through it. That was kind of cool. But rewind all the way back when I was in 5th grade, I specifically talked my mom to keeping me home from school when I had like a singing performance thing. Like the whole class was doing it. It was just like a choir thing. And I was like, Mom, I don't want to get up on stage. It's horrible. I don't really. And she was like, okay, I'll just call you in sick. And she did, right?
Oh, you didn't even pretend to be sick. You just said, I can't do it, Mom.
Yeah, I can't, I don't want to do this. She was like, okay, fine. And so I don't know. I kind of look back on that. I was like, I wish I would have done that. But I don't know. There's something with like, I don't know, missing out in the beginning. But I didn't realize like what I was missing until really high school. And now we're in our networking group and getting up, just talking for 30 seconds every week. I remember being a part of this a few years ago, and I sat next to you. Did I tell you this?
I think so.
Yeah, I got so mad. I sit next to you. I used to get nauseous and like really nervous and nauseous, and my slide's gonna come up. I got to get up and speak for 30 seconds, and I tell you that, and you're like, yeah, I got nothing prepared. And then I'm like, okay, cool. At least this guy's also like me. He has nothing prepared. You get up and you spit out some limerick rhyme thing, and you're like, yeah, I wrote that in like 2 minutes. And I'm just like, dude, what the heck, man? And fast forward to now, it's better.
But it takes a long time to get better. I mean, for me, it took like this networking group is this basically my education in networking, right?
Yeah.
My education in a significant part of it anyway, in standing up and public speaking and any of that. And it was years and years before that 30 seconds didn't freak me out. And I would sit down with my heart pounding and blood rushing through your ears, and it's intense.
It's intense, but also it is very helpful. And I realize in other situations outside of our networking group, I get very comfortable standing up in front of a crowd. Like it's not a big deal. Like if I got to go and do something, I go and I do something. This few weeks ago, I was shooting some video work for some camp thing, and they were like, "Oh, anybody just walk up and grab the microphone and give a little testimony of what's happening going on here. What helped you and whatever." It was very comfortable for me. Like, yeah, I could say a few words to these kids, sure, and it was like nothing. And then it was all right. You do realize how little people actually care, and when you get over your own nerves, like. It's just practice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just have to keep doing it. And I think, you know what, though? As much as I say, like, getting over the idea of what people think, you do need to just keep practicing it. Like, and people will tell you, hey, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It takes so long for that to be beaten into you to where it's like, no, it really doesn't matter. We meet 7:30 in the morning. Half the people are asleep. They don't care. Or you say something quirky and weird and funny. It's like, finally, there's a little bit of a little lighter in the morning,
I think when you realize how low the bar really is.
Right. Yeah.
Especially for, an extemporaneous speaking is always going to cause...
what?
Extemporaneous speaking.
We talked about that.
Yes.
What were we talking? It was like a temporary...
just off the cuff.
Okay, off the cuff.
Without prepared comments.
Yeah.
It's always going to create some anxiety, I think. But when someone's not making a record of it, like we're doing here,
right.
It can be much easier.
Yeah.
Because again, they're going to forget it, right? No one's going to remember really what you say. They're going to remember maybe how they felt as you were talking.
And I know that people would say, well, I mean, if anything bad, like, you feel bad for people that fail or bomb or do something. Like, oh man, I just feel bad for that guy. On my end, if I say something dumb or I mess up or whatever, and then you have to feel bad for me, I don't want you to feel bad for me. That feels bad. I hate the way that feels. The fact that, like, now I'm getting this, like, pity of, like, no, you're fine. One of the worst things I remember watching, it was a play, like a 6th grade play of, like, The Wizard of Oz, and, like, the girl that played the witch. Like, I messed up my first night in where I forgot a line in my play. But I rolled with it, like, and then one of my friends, he, like, asked me, who was in the play, like, he, like, asked me, like, oh, what, isn't it da-da-da-da? And I was like, yeah, and then I was right back into it, right? But it was fun. She, like, blanked, turned red, and just started, like, looking around, and I was like, me and the crowd, I'm like, I don't want to be here anymore. I hate this.
Watching other people be embarrassed is a really difficult. That's one of the things that my wife struggles with, I think, more than anything else. Like that crawling horror that you have when you see someone else, being embarrassed. And maybe because...
And you don't even know how to fix it. Because you can't... Like, right. Oh, hey, it's okay. Then that's, like, worse for them.
Right.
Like, for me, I would feel like I would wish people just ignored it and just, like, didn't pay any attention. And I try and think about that sometimes whenever people don't do well in our networking group or whatever. I don't make a comment afterwards to them. Like, oh, man, it was fine.
Everyone does great.
Yeah. Don't even say that. I would rather just be completely ignored and nobody even talks about it ever.
Right.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh.
No, sometimes there's something to knowing, when something is going to fall or how something is going to fall. There was, when I was in undergrad, we would go to this poetry reading in Gainesville, and it was a group of friends, and they would all read, and then there was one who wrote a poem about sort of this group of people and how they each were reading, or how they each were writing poems, and just kind of their style. And I remember the lines that she had about one of the people they're reading was, his words fly or fall just as he knew they would. Just as he knew they would. So, like, the idea that, like, there's something about, you just step into it, Maybe it's going to fly, maybe it's going to fall, but you just do it.
Yeah, that's something that I, want to try and practice that, But I do sometimes get that blank where it's like my brain just, like, shuts down. And mid-sentence, mid-talking about something, or even like, oh, I have a point, but then just completely drawing a blank at that point, which I don't like whenever people say, like, well, if you forgot what you were going to say, then it must not have been important. That is not true. That is not true, because it's like, sometimes I think it was quite profound, and then I remember it later, and I'm like, oh, I wish I would have said that, but I completely blanked. Like, there's some sort of, like, spiritual thing to that. I'm like, well, if it wasn't said, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean? I'm like, that's taking me out of it. And
I always
hurts
just
my
think
feelings.
if it'll come back to me eventually. I know it'll come back around, but
yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, maybe there's a spiritual aspect to the idea of what if I was going to say something and it wasn't the right time for that to be said, and whatever, God's orchestrating something else. Whatever. I'm not saying that whatever I have that I blank on is like this prophecy that's going to happen and I'm not supposed to warn people about. That's not what I'm saying. that would be...
The forgetful Cassandra.
Right, yeah. I was like, man, God's doing something because I got all these prophecies and I keep blanking on them. That would be bad. Or maybe not. I don't know. It's not true.
That would be kind of funny, though. A forgetful prophet. Like, or a forgetful oracle, like there was something really important.
And then it happens and they're like, oh, that's right.
That's right. That's what it was.
That's what it was. I just remembered. That kind of reminds me. You remember the movie Mystery Men?
Mm-mm.
It was with like Ben Stiller, and it actually had Dane Cook showed up in it, but it was a superhero movie, but it was like these like makeshift superhero people. Like Ben Stiller had like an anger thing, and but there was a guy, and one guy like threw forks and spoons and knives, like that was his thing. Mm-hmm. There was Keenan and Kel. So Kel, you remember the show Keenan and Kel?
No.
From Nickelodeon. Good Burger.
Oh, I'm lost.
You are more educated than me for a reason. It's because my brain is mush from these things. Anyways, Keenan and Kel. Kel, his superpower was he could be invisible.
Okay.
But he could be invisible if nobody's looking at him. Right. But you're like, wait a minute, this guy's just like tagging along with us. Like that's bullcrap.
That's
like,
awesome.
No. But then like towards the end of the movie, right? Like there's like this thing where like he needs to sneak around somewhere, and they're like, all right, turn around, I'm gonna do it, and like everybody turns around, nobody's looking.
What if they're looking at him through cameras? Can he still be invisible?
That's so funny. That's the scene.
Okay, all right.
That's actually the scene. Like they you actually see that he does disappear, and then like they're sneaking into this big mansion or whatever. That spoiler alert. Watch my story now. You actually see like some things kind of move on camera, but he actually turned invisible when nobody's. And then whenever he repairs, he's completely naked or whatever, because I guess that's how it also works too. Oh, because he has to be naked. Because if not, like his clothes would just be able to just be floating. Right. So he had to people had to turn around, and take his clothes off. Anyways, that's a weird statement to say. Say turn around, take his clothes off. Yeah. Anyways, we're going to actually get into something a little more that I want which actually a lot of this is what I want the podcast to be driven by, of just casual conversation and talking, but also you went to law school, right? Which is a feat in of itself, just the fact that you went, graduated, and became a lawyer. Whether you're good or bad, don't even have to talk about that, but the idea of the fact that that's an accomplishment that not a lot of people go through and do, because
they're smarter than me.
Yes, there are way more than you. Yeah. And there's bad ones. There's really bad ones that also did it. But it's still a really cool accomplishment. And I'm just trying to think, like, the mentality like you had to go through that was just, which we talked was like your now father-in-law kind of just put the little spark in your brain. And you're like, okay. But if somebody would put that spark in my brain of like, hey man, think about law school, even at a young age, I did not like school. So even if somebody would be like, you would have been a good lawyer, I'm like, I do not think I would have taken that.
Nobody told you would have been a good lawyer?
Nobody told me.
You would have been a good lawyer. I can tell you right now.
I'm 37.
Hey.
I hope the spark does not happen.
37, 3 years of law school. By the time you're 40, be a lawyer.
I don't have the first parts of school. I don't have an associate's. I just went to technical school after high school because I did not like schooling. I think I'd appreciate more schooling now at an older age. Anyways, all that being said, so I do feel like there's something in your brain that goes, oh, I can not only affect somebody sparks that in you to go to law school, but you felt as though you could accomplish it. Like you wouldn't start something like that you could accomplish.
Before I started, I felt like I could accomplish it. In the first year, I felt like there's no way I can accomplish this.
Yeah.
I mean, the first year was extremely difficult psychologically. I mean, it was a total shift right? From in an English undergrad, everybody basically wants you to succeed, right? Your professors, your the students that you're there with, your classmates. When you get to law school, everything's on a curve. So necessarily there is immediately a hierarchy of grades, right? Which I was shocking in some ways. And then, then you get out and it's, of course it's very competitive if you are in the humanities or in English or something like that. If you're trying to actually get a PhD and then get a job, that's also very competitive. But, law is also a relatively competitive field. And so I think getting introduced to that level of competition was sort of a shock to my system.
So what kind of, so when you say shock to your system, so what did you change? Did you change something about yourself? Did you get more serious? Did you stop partying and go into all the frat stuff?
I ate more chocolate.
Yeah.
I would literally sit in a corner, a corner of the law school. There's a big open space in the middle of UF's law school. It's got the stairs going up to the second floor, but they have these kind of concrete risers, I guess they are. They make good seats. And so I would just kind of sit there where I could observe everything. Nobody could get behind me.
Yeah.
And I'd read poetry and I'd eat figs and I'd eat chocolate. And that's in large part how I subsisted through that first year.
So what did you like the caffeine in chocolate? Like what?
I think it's the theobromine, if that's what it's called. There's some sort of component in chocolate that's supposed to elevate your mood. So that's what I was banking on.
And okay, so you just took that in as like, oh, this is a tool for me to use.
Yes.
I don't even care about the flavor. So
no, I like the flavor too. But
did you go dark chocolate because of that?
Oh,
like get
absolutely.
as much of it as possible?
Oh, the darkest chocolate, 70, 75%.
Or more.
85 gets a little bitter, but yeah.
I think it's all pretty bitter. Anyways, I just thought I'm bitter. So, okay, you are a coffee freak as well. Anytime I've ever hung out with you, you like to... Your cafes, your coffee is pretty important to you.
I do. Yeah, I love coffee. I used to work in coffee shops.
Yeah. All right, back to the law school thing. So, chocolate, okay. What about any other kind of routine? Did you have any kind of like morning routine, something to get your get up and going? Because when you talk about success, when you talk about drive, you look up any of these people that do that well. They're like 5:30 in the morning up. Heck, some people are like 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I got my workout in, pumping in, this much water by the time it's 6 a.m. and all these things. And I'm like, yeah, but you probably go to bed at like 7:30. And I hate that idea. Anyways, but they have a routine. Did you have some sort of routine to help you get through law school?
I did not have a specific routine other than just hang on with teeth and claws.
Yeah.
It was, I've never considered myself to be a driven person. I know you've talked a little bit about drive and things like that. And when I think about that term in relation to humans, I don't put myself in that category.
Okay.
So yeah,
So you went from now law school, whatever, you were a big law firm, right? And then you just broke away to now you have your own law firm. It's just you. Like, what is your drive now? What do you have a routine now? Do you have something that at least gets you in the groove now to keep going? Because it's all on you, And so to not all of a sudden dread comes over.
Now the sword of Damocles is there hanging over the head.
And so I'm just trying to think now, what are you doing now to where you're like, oh, I could just not do anything for like 8 days and then just pick this thing right back up. It's like, no, daily, like Monday through Friday, Tuesday through Saturday, roughly every day. Mm-hmm. What keeps you going,
So I've had to set, there's a couple of things. So there's like the need to eat. That's a helpful sort of goad to things, especially with the 3 kids. And
do you eat early?
The wife.
Breakfast and you eat early?
Oh, no, I just mean like having to buy the food for everyone.
Yeah, you got bills and things where you're like, my drive is the fact that I have to put bread on we have to, and we don't want to be eating ramen noodles the whole time.
Right. So that's, my kids eat what is it, 3 times a day, is what they want to eat. 4 times if you count bedtime snacks. So,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, so that's one part of it. And then, the other part of it is I have clients who have real needs that need
Right.
to be met. And so, their stories and the fact that I get to help them,
Yeah.
right, move through this time in their lives, that can be and it is a big motivation.
I would say I don't consider myself very driven, unless it's somebody has to ask me. Somebody has to kind of go like, hey, could you, or da-da-da, or hey, you're working on this. And so whenever it comes like work stuff, this podcast is very meta right now. The fact that this is even happening, because this is all based off of my own will to do a thing that is a decent amount of work, which I'm kind of doing this as a project for myself. And so
Right, we're inside your drive right now.
We're inside my drive right now. Outside of this, you're like, well, Brett, even when it comes to work, like I love the idea of like when my phone's ringing and stuff's happening, I go to my networking group. But like outside of that, I'm like, I know I'm leaving money on the table. I don't even know where to start, what to do, all these things. And so you're in that place as well, somewhat, to where you being your own, Zach West law firm, like, what is it that you have that you're doing? So like, I obviously I know you go to your known networking group, right? And that helps. But it's like, what else out there? Like, and if you really think about it, our own networking group that we go to, you don't need to make a logo. You don't need to really set up any kind of advertisement if you just work that system. But the thing is, that's not it. That's always a percentage of your income would be of that.
Right.
There's some people, it's like 90% of their income is from our group that we're in. And it's like that's crazy to me.
It's a lot of eggs in one basket, I think.
Yeah.
I think that for me, it's really helpful, and I only came to this realization, and it wasn't me, it was in a book, but recently.
As it would be coming from you.
Correct, yes. And it's that if you can if I can separate myself from the outcome and just focus on practices, right? Like I know that if I do X, Y, or Z, like cases will eventually come in, right? And if I focus, and I can't control, like I have no control over whether whether someone calls me or whether they have a good case or not, or none of that. But I do have control over the inputs, right? Like, am I networking? Am I going to the networking group? Am I doing other networking events? Am I, meeting people for lunches? Am I, having coffee with people? Am I getting my name out there and what I do out there in such a way that eventually it's going to lead to business? But if you focus on that, right? If you hyper focus on the outcome, it's distracting. It can be depressing sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's my big thing with like social media, right? Like as a photographer, you check my Instagram. It isn't great. There's some things on there, but it was like, all right, cool. Let me go ahead and put this up there. I did it not consistently. I did it, there was no drive to it. Was like, oh, I remembered to do something. And also sometimes I wasn't really making products where I was like, oh, that's good to do. So, but then I had to be strategic and I was like, I'm not even getting phone calls from this. I'm out. Like, and I didn't, I actually hired somebody for a little bit to put stuff up for me. Nothing came from that. It was just something I paid this person to do. But that's not what everybody says. Like everybody would say, what you're saying is, no, keep going. Just keep going. It does produce, income. It does produce clients at one point, but you have to keep going.
Right.
And that keep going is like a daily thing that is very hard for me to constantly do,
And so two things that I think of when you're talking about that. One is making it sustainable, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can't say, okay, I'm going to take this massive action over this massively long period of time. Right? Like that's not going to work. Maybe it does for some people. I don't know. But yeah. I think that small, and the other side of that would be like small actions taken consistently are going to yield results. And the way that you allow yourself to take them consistently is you make them sustainably sized, right? So it's got to be something that works with the rest of your life the rest of your sanity, all of those things.
Yeah. No, actually, one of the things I realize with productivity-wise is if I pump myself full of caffeine and don't eat. Because once lunchtime comes and I have something in my stomach, I'm like, how do I not do anything ever, until tomorrow? And that's not the case. I mean, I have a lot of other things I got to keep doing. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm like...
The other thing is, which I notice in myself, a lot of times when I feel the most productive is not actually when I'm the most productive. So I would agree that when I am full of caffeine and not eating and maybe running on, not very much sleep, it feels very, there's this, I don't know, I'm not sure what to call it exactly. You get into this state where it's like, yeah, I'm doing things. Maybe it's a little manic, it's like we're getting things done.
And you're just...
exactly. Right. You're spinning. You're spinning your wheels.
It's basically cocaine.
No, I mean, but it's there's not a lot of traction happening.
Okay.
Right. And so, but when you're doing, so let's take, forget about let's say the outcome is productivity, right? And the inputs are, I don't know, the coffee or what you eat. I find that if the inputs are better, if my inputs are better, if I'm eating better, I'm sleeping more, I'm, getting the right amount of caffeine, not too much.
Right.
The outcome is going to be better because I'm going to be able to be actually productive for a longer period of time rather than like, you spike up really high and then you crash or what.
So my thing is, it's still like once I eat something. So I do try to make sure I get good sleep, but then I still, when it's like I have a busy morning or something, I do want to be caffeinated. And I don't know if that's like my brain and fog and like, I'm undiagnosed, probably diagnosed ADHD. I mean, anybody that I compare myself to, I'm like, oh my gosh, I relate to all of that pretty well, and also dyslexia as well. Again, undiagnosed, but I couldn't read until I was like in 4th grade. But so I've been recently trying to keep track of myself of like, okay, when do I do best? And I can do work in the afternoon. I can do work late morning, afternoon. I can do work all day if I have responsibilities to clients, if I have, photo, video shoots that are scheduled in there. But it's when it's like, hey, today, you have a little bit of something you need to do. And then other than that, it's like, all right, now what are you doing for your business? Then it's like, man, if 12 o'clock happens and then that comes over my brain of like, well, now what am I going to do for my business? I have no idea. And once I get food in my system, it's like I just shut down. And I try not to eat a lot. Like, as an American, I probably still, or as like worldwide, I probably still eat too much. But I do try to eat to like, I don't finish, most of the time I don't finish my food. Especially if I go to a restaurant. Like, I kind of have a thing of like not eating the last few fries. I just don't, which is really weird. Sometimes a burger, I leave a part of it, but I still get into the food coma. And then I'm just like, I'm done, unless I have like a specific shoot or something right after that. And I'm like, I don't know how to keep going once I don't have anybody directly responsible for me, but I'm responsible for me.
So how do you get yourself into a place where you can create, I've been thinking about something like that recently, which is creating crises. It sounds bad, right? But, because I think for those of us who procrastinate, I don't know if you will join me in that, category, but
that's this whole thing.
Right. So,
I mean, context is key. Obviously, I procrastinate.
Right. So, I wanted you to say the word. You hadn't said the word.
I'm the procrastinator. Yeah.
I don't want to presume. But I think that one of the reasons that procrastination feels so powerful is because it creates this crisis that we then rise up underneath and we get it done, right? There's a thing. It's like, well, it's gonna take you as long as you give yourself to do, right? If I give myself a week to do something, it's gonna take me a week. If I give myself a day, it's just gonna take me a day.
Well, the thing is, whenever I create a deadline for a week for me, it's the end of the week where I'm like, all right, I'll just pull an all-nighter. I'm in crisis mode, and I'll make it work. I'll do it,
right?
Or I'll like the last 2 days. Now I haven't done too many all-nighters. Haven't done that in a few years, but I used to do that. I used to be like, I know I have something coming up in a week, and I know how long it's roughly going to take me. I want to do it now.
And I think...
And that's so irresponsible.
Well, but I think that if we can, going back to the focus on the process rather than the outcome, right? If you know, well, first of all, if you know that that's an aspect of your personality, I think it's probably a good idea to go with it, right? Not exclusively, but to know that that's there. You're probably going to put yourself in a crunch at the very end, and it's probably going to lead to some interesting, creative things.
Yeah.
Right? Changes.
That's the problem, too, is I became really good at what I've been able to do very fast.
Right.
Which also is like, it's not, that doesn't help.
Explain that one again.
So whenever I'm in crunch mode, I knock whatever the heck I need to do out of the park, and people are like, yeah, that's great.
Right.
You know, like, even though I know that if I had a little more time into it, I could have made it like perfect or better, but I didn't. I ran out of time.
Right.
You know,
and so that's exactly what I was going to say, was that if you give yourself something better to work with, like a better, raw material, right? If you work on it over a period of time where you're not in crunch mode, then you let the crunch mode happen, and you take that better raw material, and then now it's even, more superior.
So does this relate to anything that you do? Do you do something where, like, procrastination, as you labeled yourself as a procrastinator? So how if you failed, in some ways, but then also, like, where have you, like, succeeded? How did you put in the routine to succeed in some of those times where you're like, I knew I would have normally procrastinated this, but I actually, it's kind of a success story where, like, I actually didn't. I beat up on this project or whatever the heck, calling client, working with something 2 to 3 to 4 hours at a time, or just to where you set it up to where it wasn't all at one focused time. Do you?
I mean, I don't know that I have one. There's not one thing that springs to mind, but I think for me, I'm still trying to figure out the best way to balance those two things, right? Mm-hmm. One of the ways is just setting something on the calendar, not just setting the deadline as the deadline, but like micro deadlines, ahead of it, right? Which don't create, it's just so interesting. Like you always think that they're going to create that same sort of pressure, but they never create it, right? It creates it like... I
have that I'm supposed to work out every day at 12. I haven't
You have it on the calendar?
On the calendar. I haven't worked out in 5 months.
But working out...
3 months, 2 months.
Okay, but working out is a great metaphor, I think, for this, like, creating crisis, right? I was realizing this the other day. Like, when you're lifting weights, I don't know exactly what kind of workouts you're doing.
But I'm not a big guy.
But if you're lifting something, it doesn't matter how big it is, but you are putting yourself in some kind of crisis. Right? Okay. Like now there is weight over your head.
Right.
And now it's on your chest, and now you have to push it up, or you're squatting it, or whatever.
Right.
But like you create this like microcosm where there's a crisis that has to be dealt with. And I guess I wonder if there's some way to translate that into business productivity or work productivity in a way that is healthy and not just, procrastinating right at the last minute.
So what I have done recently is, because with some of the work that I've done, I've actually hired contractors out to do things that I roughly don't want to do, and know that I would be able to get a better product and done at a proper deadline, mainly because the project I'm doing is actually really big, and I do need some people. I didn't need as many people, and I could have taken on some of that. I still didn't do that because it actually feels really good, the fact that it's not all over my head. But it was easier to manage it and say, hey, I'm giving you guys deadlines. Mm-hmm. The client, their deadline is this time. I'm giving you guys deadlines to this time. And that was really easy for me to do that. And part of me feels really bad.
No, that's a great point. Maybe that's the way to do it, is to outsource your procrastination to other people. And then you can set them strict deadlines that are well before the actual deadline.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I'm working with. That's what I'm trying to do, and that's kind of taking my weakness to try and make it better. But the problem is, I wish I just didn't have that weakness, or I wish I could overcome the weakness. But I still have clients that need to be happy at the same time, and so trying to balance that part out. I don't know. I see other people, and they're able to do so much more and to overcome. And I balk at a lot of things. I don't know if you ever take personality tests or anything like that. You've probably taken some.
I have before, yeah.
But I am a stubborn person to where if it's something that I don't want to do,
Is there a personality test where that's the answer? Like you're just a stubborn
It
person?
is. Yeah.
Okay.
There's the one where there's the 5 animals. It's sanguine, supine,
lupine. No.
No, it's a golden. They actually relate it to animals.
A golden
too.
retriever.
Golden retriever.
Okay.
An otter, a lion, a beaver, and a donkey. Right, and so it's the temperament test.
Okay.
Right, and then they have like scientific terms about like people that are like funny or fun. They go, oh look, they're related to animals. And in control, I am the donkey's in the middle, and so it's a graph. Right, so it's like whenever you take the test, you're like. Everything relates to the middle to wherever you're at. So there's the sanguine, the otter is a people person. They're your people person. They're your they like to associate with people. Then there's the beaver.
Is this like the Enneagram but with pictures? Is that what?
Kind of. It does kind of relate. There's different depth to it. They both can get very deep. This is just one I relate to. I think a lot as well. I also do the Enneagram, but. What this does is it does your basically how you work with people, how you work under control, like how you control situations, and then how are you affectionately, and in control. I'm basically smack dab in the middle. I'm a donkey, and a donkey is like they're stubborn. Like I won't cause problems, like the lion would. Whatever. I'm not like a leader, like whatever. But whenever a leader person tells me what to do, and if I don't really agree with it, I might actually go like, sure, okay, and just figure out how to get out of it, and just never do it, or actually just completely go like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And so I was really happy whenever a personality test was like, hey, that's actually a real thing. Like, that's a part of you. Like a lot of people are like that. It's like. Cool. What do I do with that?
Yeah, did it give you any hints?
It did. Well, it does definitely help me realize, like, okay, that is who I am, but that doesn't mean I should say no to truths or balk to truths and stuff like that. It's things that can actually be helpful. And am I doing that? But it also helps whenever somebody else realizes that. And it is a way to kind of be loving towards me, too, where they're like, oh, I see that you were being really stubborn in this situation. That's fine. Whatever, or that's a way to go like, here, man, I see you're being stubborn, and I promise you this is helpful.
But I think that socially, probably there's a benefit to having some people that are pushing forward, some people right in the middle, some people hanging back a little bit. I mean, that sounds a little bit like I forget where I heard this or who said it, but the way a band is supposed to work, right? That like the lead guitarist hangs back and the drummer's pushing forward and the bass is like right in the middle.
Yeah. Not everybody can be the CEO. Right, like so in that temperament, in the temperament test, the lion, the choleric, right? There's some people that are choleric, and people hate the fact that they're choleric.
I heard cleric, but you were saying choleric. Yes, okay.
Some people don't like the fact that they have that, but I'm like, people need to be that in the world. Like it's your in one of the big aspects of being a choleric when it comes to dealing with people is you use people. That's what it says. And so people take that as like, well, I don't want to come across as I use people. Like, no. It's not as negative as it sounds. Yes, you do see people basically for what value do they have, and then how can you utilize that? That could sound, you can abuse that.
Sure.
And all of this can be roughly abused. You can abuse that and be like a narcissist and a jerk.
Right. It all has a shadow side to it, but there's a positive thing as well.
But also there's like somebody has to be able to see other people's strengths and go, oh, here's where I put them in. Here's where they need to be. And I don't really see, and that's the negative thing is like you don't really see them outside of what they bring to the table. They're not in some aspects they're not as they don't think about the person as a person. As much as somebody who is sanguine or supine in that like if you're supine when it deals with people, inclusion, I believe that's what it's called. Inclusion, control, and affection, right? So what are you in each one of those things? Whenever you're an otter with people, you are all about like, I want to know about you, I want you to know about me, and then we're friendly and all these things, and how can I be loving towards you and all this kind of stuff, like, what you're loving and how do we become best friends?
Gregarious.
And cholerics are not that. Cholerics are, what can you do for me? you know? And they might not, they don't come across that way. They won't always come across that way, but that's their mentality. That's the way they're thinking. And so
it's more of an instrumentalist approach to,
And again, it has its negatives, you know, could come across as a little more, the person could be more either standoffish or just like not want to deal with you, or they see you as a great person. That like, oh, you're my best friend because
very useful.
You're useful. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I realize I'm not like that so much. Like I don't really relate to. I actually kind of like finding the underdogs, you know, or me as a sanguine person. The otter is like I don't find other otters. I look for beavers. I look for the people that and like beavers are like workaholics or people that are quiet. You know, I normally find challenges and then I'm like, I want to be your best friend. I want you to like me. Which actually might be more the supine, which is the golden retriever. You want to.
Is it supine because the golden retriever is laying on their back?
Yes.
With their...
Yes. Okay. Exactly. They give up. They're like,
Rub my belly. Belly rubs.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And that's what I am in an affection. Mm-hmm. Like whenever it comes to like, you know, with my kids or, you know, whatever, it's like I'm very much like, how do I serve? How do I make you happy? Mm-hmm. You know? But yeah. Anyways, so hold on. I wanted to end with this, which is restarting a little bit. Do you have specifically a daily routine? Or is there a day that you have a daily routine? Not Thursday mornings. So it's Tuesday morning. You're about to wake up. What do you do?
I don't have a daily routine, is the answer.
Coffee?
I mean, sure. I have.
Okay.
No, I mean, I can tell you my daily routine. It's not very interesting. You wake up in the morning. You have I don't have coffee. I have tea in the morning because coffee is too tweaky at this, age. I don't know why. I have coffee on the weekends, or sometimes before I do podcasts, I'll have coffee.
Right. Yeah. I go to energy drinks.
Right.
I'm fine.
And then I have breakfast. I try to have the breakfast be somewhat protein heavy, eggs or something like that. And then I will, my family will wake up. I usually wake up more or less before them, not usually before the kids. Usually the kids wake up really early.
Is it nighttime whenever is it still sun's down? Like
no,
6:30?
6:30, sometimes 7:30. It just depends.
Okay.
And then I will, everybody will eat something. I have one kid who does not like anything sweet for breakfast, so it's always or eggs or any of the standard savory breakfast things. So it's always like a real challenge. Like, would you like some pizza for breakfast this morning?
Pizza's not a bad breakfast.
Right.
Yeah.
So, everybody gets fed. And then I get out the door to the office and I will try what I've been trying to do for the last, I guess, a year and a half now is to do some kind of like a liturgical reading.
Okay.
So I have an app that has a reading with some Bible verses.
Does that get your brain engaged a little bit, or does that take your focus off of yourself?
It's brain. So I think I started it as a way to address some anxiety.
Okay.
Right? So the combination of reading that and then I will do sort of a meditative prayer that is...
is this while you're driving?
No, because I have to remember not to close my eyes. No, I'll wait till I get to the office and I'll set a timer.
Yeah. I
started at 2 minutes and now I've got it to 5 minutes and I'll just do like some breathing where I'm breathing in, breathe in for 4, a count of 4, and then breathe out for a count of 8 and be praying during that time. And I wanted to do the prayer because just the breathing felt like my mind was just wandering, really,
Is this Monday through Friday?
I try to, yeah.
I mean, that's a solid routine. You were saying like I don't really have a routine. It's kind of boring.
That's my only routine, though.
But that's a good setup. I mean, I think people forget about breathing, especially with people like with anxiety and like just throughout the day and crazy stuff starts happening to them, and then they start like worriers. I'm like, have you tried box breathing? Do it for like a minute.
Right. What is box? I've heard of this one too.
Box breathing is 4-4-4, right? You breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds.
Oh, gotcha.
It does the same thing as a big breath, right? Mm-hmm. Whenever you're starting a meditation, like take a big breath in, take a big breath out. You know, there might be some slight difference, but for the most, it just slows your heart rate down.
Yeah, I got to the breathing, the 4-8 breathing. I read somewhere that it was affecting I think it's the vagus nerve or something like that, and it's supposed to reduce your heart rate and just bring down your nervous system, which is a good way, for me anyway, to start the day.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's a routine. That's solid. If you do that every day, that would be something that most people don't do.
And I think that has had a demonstrative anyway, an effect, a visible effect on my anxiety. So
and productivity, does it help you jump into work, or it just kind of just helps you not worry and go crazy?
I think it helps me not kind of like pew 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 like jump around to all these different tasks.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now I have some focus. Also, what helps is getting up even earlier. Like if I get up before everyone else and can do work before anyone else is awake, that's another time where like I can be focused, and it feels like the hours are actually longer than they are.
Right.
Like every hour after 10 o'clock in the morning seems like it's like it gets shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yes.
But those hours early in the morning can really lengthen.
I would for sure agree with that. It feels like whenever I get up in the morning, and if there's like something kind of pressing and I have to basically like get up and maybe I get coffee or I go right to my computer. It happens a few times, but whenever it has happened, I feel like I'm knocking everything out in 20 minutes. It feels like, you know what I mean? And I definitely feel like the morning time productivity is when I'm the most productive.
I wonder if there's something about just physiologically the movement from starting work in the dark and like moving through the dawn, if that has some effect.
I remember playing video games through that.
Well, no, because I
it's
think
like, the sun's coming out. I'm responsible, I promise.
Right. I wonder, but I think it might feel like
I've done that.
More productive. Like, I got up and I started work in the dark, and then I worked through, into the end of the day. I don't know. Maybe not. I think it might just be psychological. Like, I'm so productive. I got up in the dark and I worked until it was daylight.
Yes. The only problem with that is, and this is my negative thinking, is I know that if I have to get up and do something like that, first, my sleep's not going to be great.
Right.
Second, I'm like, I'm going to be tired all day, and I don't want to be that, And so, I don't know. I got a lot of work to do. I think I got a lot of mentalities I need to come out of that are negative, that stop me from doing things. Like just the idea of being a boring person that goes to sleep early. Like that just sounds atrocious to me. But supposedly it's great. Like that's what people do. And maybe I'm somewhat of a night person. I don't know. But I got work to do. So be patient with me, I guess. Yeah. Hey, thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you. This was a great opportunity.
This wasn't that hard?
No.
Was it?
No.
Yeah.
No.
No. Just I'm not going to lift up my arms
yeah,
where you
right.
see the drench of all the sweat. No, it's not that. All right. Well, thank you, Zach. And, yep.